A 62-day road trip in 1919 turned into the largest public works project in American history. The Eisenhower Interstate Highway System now stretches across more than 48,000 miles, handles 25% of all American traffic on just 1% of the nation's roads, and generates an estimated $6 in economic growth for every dollar spent building it. Before any of that could happen, though, a young Army officer needed to experience firsthand just how terrible America's roads actually were. Summer of 1919 found 28-year-old Brevet Lieutenant Colonel Dwight D. Eisenhower joining the Army Motor Transport Corps convoy from Washington, D.C. to San Francisco. His own explanation for signing up was simple: partly for a lark and partly to learn. What he learned would reshape American infrastructure for generations to come. 81 motorized Army vehicles, 24 officers, and 258 enlisted men set out to cross the continent on the Lincoln Highway. Eisenhower wrote afterward that they weren't even sure the crossing could be accomplished at all, since nothing of the sort had ever been attempted before. The numbers tell the story of that journey: 62 days to complete, averaging just 6 miles per hour, and covering only 58 miles on a typical day. A scout drove ahead each morning to mark the route so vehicles wouldn't wander off course, and the expedition recorded 230 motor accidents and incidents along the way. Trucks crashed through wooden bridges that couldn't handle their weight, vehicles sank into quicksand, and mud trapped them for hours at a time. Eisenhower described the roads in his November 1919 report as absolutely incapable of meeting present-day traffic requirements, and that assessment stayed with him for decades. 25 years later, while serving as Supreme Allied Commander in Europe during World War II, Eisenhower witnessed something that reinforced those early lessons. German Autobahn highways enabled efficient military logistics and helped the Allied victory, and on July 20, 1945, he rode those roads with President Truman on the way to the Potsdam Conference. His memoir, At Ease, captured what both experiences taught him. The old convoy had started me thinking about good two-lane highways, but Germany had made me see the wisdom of broader ribbons across the land. Eisenhower didn't dream up the interstate system alone. Highway planners and engineers had laid the groundwork over many years before he became president. The Bureau of Public Roads had been studying superhighway concepts since the late 1930s, producing 2 reports that shaped everything that followed. Toll Roads and Free Roads came out in 1939 and concluded that tolls couldn't finance a national system by themselves. Interregional highways followed in 1944 with a recommendation for 33,900 miles of connected routes between major cities. Congress responded with the Federal Aid Highway Act of 1944, authorizing 40,000 miles of what they called the National System of Interstate Highways. One problem remained, though. No dedicated funding came with the authorization, which meant the plan sat mostly on paper. By August 1947, the first 37,700 miles had been designated, but actual construction stayed minimal and America's roads remained inadequate for modern commerce and defense needs. Eisenhower took office in 1953 determined to change that situation. August 1954 brought the creation of the President's Advisory Committee on a National Highway Program, and he put his close friend, General Lucius D. Clay, in charge. Clay's credentials were perfect for the job: a West Point engineer who had orchestrated the Berlin airlift. Exactly the kind of man Eisenhower trusted with an enormous logistical challenge. The Clay Committee delivered its report in February 1955, making the case for a national interstate network, and that same year, the Bureau of Public Roads published what everyone called the Yellow Book. Officially titled General Location of National System of Interstate Highways, this document mapped routes through 123 cities, with populations over 50,000, and became the blueprint for construction. Congress approved the Federal Aid Highway Act on June 26, 1956, with a Senate vote of 89-1, where only Senator Russell B. Long voted no, while the House approved by voice vote. 3 days later, on June 29th, President Eisenhower signed the bill into law at Walter Reed Army Medical Center during his recovery from surgery, with no ceremony and no photographers present. $25 billion for 41,000 miles of highway Over 12 to 13 years is what the legislation authorized, with the federal government covering 90% of construction costs and states paying the remaining 10%. Treasury Secretary George Humphrey deserves credit for the funding mechanism's brilliance. The Highway Trust Fund. Representative Hale Boggs of Louisiana wrote Title II of the Act, which created dedicated financing by raising federal gas taxes from 2 to 3 cents per gallon and adding taxes on diesel fuel, tires, trucks, and buses. Everything operated on a pay-as-you-go basis, matching construction to available revenue. Representative George Fallon of Maryland wrote Title I and gave the system its official name, the National System of Interstate and Defense Highways. That word defense reflected Cold War evacuation concerns, though the Federal Highway Administration notes the program had such strong support for its civilian benefits that it would have passed even without the defense angle. Eisenhower captured the magnitude in his own words. More than any single action by the government since the end of World War II, this one would change the face of America. Its impacts on the American economy, the jobs it would produce in manufacturing and construction, the rural areas it would open up, was beyond calculation. Once funding arrived, construction accelerated rapidly. August 2, 1956 brought the first contract when the Missouri Highway Commission hired Koss Construction Company to build 13.3 miles in Laclede County, future Interstate 44, for $1.1 million. 11 days afterward, on August 13th, workers broke ground in St. Charles County, Missouri, on what would become Interstate 70. And Kansas saw paving begin on September 26th, when workers wrote 9 to 2656 in fresh concrete. November 14th, 1956 marks when the first segment opened to traffic, 8 miles of Interstate 70 west of Topeka, Kansas, officially launching America's interstate era. Engineering standards from the American Association of State Highway Officials set ambitious requirements across the board. Full access control meant limited entry and exit points with no at-grade intersections, while minimum specifications called for 4 lanes, 12-foot lane widths, design speeds between 50 and 70 miles per hour depending on terrain, and vertical clearance of 14 to 16 feet for military equipment transport. A 2006 U.S. Geological Survey study documented the staggering scale of materials consumed. 1.5 billion metric tons of natural aggregates, 48 million metric tons of cement, 35 million metric tons of asphalt, and 6 million metric tons of steel. The Federal Highway Administration offered some colorful comparisons in 1961. Enough concrete for more than 80 Hoover dams, or as they put it, 6 sidewalks to the moon. Enough structural steel for 170 Empire State Buildings. Enough excavation to bury Connecticut knee-deep. Land acquisition alone required nearly 1.5 million acres across more than 750,000 parcels, an area larger than the state of Delaware, and approximately 55,000 bridges and overpasses went up along the routes. Nebraska earned the distinction of completing all its mainline interstates first, on October 17, 1974. Interstate 80 became the first coast-to-coast route on August 22, 1986, running from San Francisco to Teaneck, New Jersey. Interstate 10 followed on August 10, 1990, linking Santa Monica to Jacksonville, and Interstate 90 completed the Seattle to Boston connection on September 12, 1991. Controversy followed the system throughout construction. The original 1956 Act contained no environmental review requirements, and by the late 1960s, opposition had spread across urban America. A 1967-68 Department of Transportation survey counted 123 separate freeway revolts in American cities. San Francisco led that resistance when the Board of Supervisors voted in 1959 to cancel 7 of 10 planned freeways after 30,000 petition signatures arrived, and a climactic 6-5 vote on October 13, 1966 rejected the Park Freeway through Golden Gate Park. Boston's Governor Francis Sargent halted all expressway construction inside Route 128 in February 1970, forcing Interstate 95 to reroute around the city, while the cleared land eventually became a linear park. These revolts helped push the National Environmental Policy Act into law on January 1, 1970. requiring environmental impact statements for federal projects and making the Federal Highway Administration the largest submitter of those statements. More than 340 miles of planned interstates never got built because they couldn't pass environmental review. Human displacement reached massive proportions. U.S. Department of Transportation estimates put the total at more than 475,000 households and over 1 million people forced to relocate nationwide, with federal construction demolishing approximately 37,000 urban housing units annually by the late 1960s. Minority communities absorbed some of the harshest impacts. Interstate 95 destroyed 87 acres of Miami's Overtown neighborhood, once called the Harlem of the South, where a massive interchange eliminated 40 square blocks and dropped the population from an estimated 40,000 to just 8,000. Syracuse's 15th Ward saw Interstate 81 displace more than 300 families from an area where nearly 90% of the city's black population lived. October 14, 1992, brought the official completion of the original system when Interstate 70 opened through Glenwood Canyon, Colorado. Decades of planning and construction had gone into this 12.5-mile engineering feat through a 2,000-foot deep canyon in the Colorado Rockies, requiring 3 tunnels, 40 bridges and viaducts, 15 miles of retaining walls, and 30 million pounds each of structural and reinforcing steel. Workers replanted 150,000 trees, shrubs, and plants after construction finished, and the segment collected more than 30 engineering and environmental awards. Original cost projections called for $25 billion over 12 years, but the final price tag reached $128.9 billion over 35 years, which translates to approximately $634 billion in 2024 currency. The return on that investment speaks for itself. $6 in economic growth for every dollar spent. Annual economic value of $742 billion, according to the National Bureau of Economic Research. 25% of the U.S. productivity increase between 1950 and 1989 attributed to the interstate system. Without these highways, real GDP would shrink by an estimated $619.1 billion every year. American commerce transformed because of this network. Interstates now carry the majority of long-haul trucking and 55% of all commodities shipped by truck measured by value, while the trucking industry employs more than 3.5 million drivers. October 15, 1990, one day after what would have been Eisenhower's birth centennial, saw the system officially renamed the Dwight D. Eisenhower National System of Interstate and Defense Highways. Interstate work continues into the present day. September 22, 2018 marked when Interstate 95 finally became fully continuous through the completion of a $553 million Pennsylvania Turnpike interchange. New interstate designations keep coming, including Interstate 14 with plans to run more than 1,000 miles from Texas to Georgia, and Interstate 42 approved in spring 2024 for an Oklahoma-Arkansas corridor. Current mileage exceeds 48,000 miles, well beyond the original 41,000-mile authorization, carrying approximately 800 billion vehicle miles annually. Interstate 405 in Los Angeles remains the busiest segment at 379,000 vehicles per day. Age has caught up with the infrastructure, though. The American Society of Civil Engineers 2021 Infrastructure Report Card assigned American roads a grade of D+ and bridges, a C. 43% of public roadways sit in poor or mediocre condition, with an estimated $684 billion funding gap over the next 10 years. More than half of bridges on the National Highway Freight Network have passed their 50th birthday. That frustrated young officer who crawled across the country at 6 miles per hour couldn't have predicted exactly what would come from his experience. When Eisenhower signed that bill at Walter Reed in 1956, he knew the broad ribbons of highway across the land would change everything. And that's exactly what happened. If you found this video interesting, hit the subscribe button and turn on notifications so you don't miss future episodes. Drop a comment below and let us know which highway you've traveled on. And share this with anyone who loves learning about engineering and American history.